HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out.
Leadership is not about who we are. It's not about our strengths. There's a lot of work. Build on your strengths. Build on your strengths. I like to change that. Build on your strengths that strengthen others. And if your strengths don't strengthen someone else, then you've probably not done your job as a leader as well as you might have done it, as you could have.
I'm not failing, I'm learning. What a powerful statement. If we think about self-leadership for a minute, what comes to mind? Is it that you're failing? Or perhaps learning? I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dave Ulrich, ranked as the #1 management guru by Business Week, profiled by Fast Company as one of the world's top 10 creative people in business, a top 5 coach in Forbes, and recognized on Thinkers 50 as one of the world's leading business thinkers. Dave Ulrich has a passion for ideas with impact. And today, we unpack an idea on self-leadership and hopefully leave you with an impactful idea on how it's okay to take time for ourselves. Stay tuned as we unpack what it means to be a leader, how we can build a better world of work, and how the only way we can achieve this is that we need to start with, you guessed it, self-leadership. Dave Ulrich, thank you for coming on the People Managing People podcast. I'm excited to have you on the show. And I know a number of our listeners who I was saying that you're coming up on the show, they're excited as well. So again, thanks for joining me here today.
Tim, what an honor. I've heard about the show and watched some of the podcasts. Just what a delight to join you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that even in the pre-show, you made it very clear, don't tell me where we're going. Don't tell me the topic. Don't tell me the questions. We're just going to have a fun, organic conversation. And so I'm excited. You know, I have an idea where I want to take this, but we'll see where it goes.
You know, my assistant, I'm going to move my camera so people can see a little bit my office in the background of where I live. My assistant, who I've worked with for 32 years, last week, she said, my husband just kidnapped me for a day. So, Tim, let's consider this. You've just kidnapped my ideas for the next few minutes. I feel totally in your control.
Well, I love that. Well, for those who do listen to the show, you know, I ask a couple questions right off the get-go. These are, I think, the only scripted questions that I typically have. The first question is, well, tell us a little bit about yourself and mostly what's top of mind for you these days.
You know, we all live complex lives right now. So I have maybe 3 domains. One is clearly family. We have 3 kids, 10 grandkids. We're trying to decide. The funny thing about our kids, I don't know if they'll listen to this, is it used to be we were a resource for them. We help our kids like they were 8 and 5 and you walk them to school. Now that our kids are older, they're kind of taking care of us as the people who need help. That's a very funny shift. But we have kids and 10 grandkids, active in our church and faith. That's a part of who we are, and really active in work. Top of mind, I am passionate about learning that creates value. So I'm always concerned about what's next in how to manage people and organization and leadership that will create value for those we care about. And so those are the 3 dimensions, family, faith, and work, that I spend my time around.
So we share some of those core values, if you will. Faith and family are a couple of mine. And so I love that. And the next question I ask, and this is purely for my own curiosity, what does it mean to be a leader? When you hear that word leader, what does it mean?
You know, there's thousands. You Google it. Somebody should Google it right now, and you get like 3 or 4 billion hits. And so everybody has an opinion. I love simplicity. My PhD is in a thing called numerical taxonomy. It's the science of simplicity. The leader is somebody who makes sure that people leave an interaction with them feeling better about themselves. Let me say that again. So if I have an interaction with Tim today or with somebody else today, do I leave that interaction feeling better about myself? Well, that's what leaders do. And sometimes that's easy. I mean, Tim, you have a great show, you have a great life, and you feel great because I've affirmed. but maybe you haven't done something very well. And the job of a leader is to still say, you haven't done something very well, but I still want you to leave that interaction feeling better about yourself. I have found that a very useful test for me. When I interact with people, can I make sure they feel better about themselves? And that's what leaders do. And then you want to build that depth as leadership all the way through a company, not just an iconic leader who may sit at the top of the company, but leadership distributed throughout the company who help other people feel better about themselves.
I've asked this question probably over 40, 45 times now, and this is the first time I've heard it explained this way. And I think this probably is one of my new favorites is leave people feeling better about themselves. And I'm curious, so, if you are giving that constructive feedback, right? You missed the mark, you're not doing your job. Why aren't you delivering? How do you then leave someone feeling better about themselves when it's just coming down?
It's a conundrum. I mean, if it was easy to do, everybody would be doing it. Let me give an example. I have the privilege periodically of coaching, and I'm coaching. In fact, it happened last week, but I won't use that example. I'll use another one without naming the person or the company. That would be inappropriate. Big company, very senior executive, and one of the executive's employees made an egregious mistake, cost the company an enormous amount of money. I had to deal with this executive. Before you send the email, global company, and they should have talked to him, send it to me. Let me coach you. And here's the email. You made a huge mistake. It's going to cost us millions of dollars. And if you don't fix it, you're fired. And I said, may I intervene? As a fairly simple, I hope so. 3 simple changes. So listen to the changes if you could. Number 1, I care about you. Number 2, you have great potential at this company. Number 3, you made a huge mistake. It's going to cost us a lot of money. And then number 3, let's learn from it so that you can live up to your potential. Notice I didn't walk away from that first, you made a mistake. It's going to cost us money. Leaders have to be accountable for themselves and for others. But I've coached a number of leaders. I coached a leader last Friday. She's head of a big company. She's going to have one of those typical conversations. And my comment to her is, can you start by saying, whatever language you use, I care about you. I really do care about you. And number 2, I want you to reach your potential. And it probably won't be at this company, but let's work to make it happen. I don't know how to do that any better. By the way, that doesn't always work. I'm not naive. But that leader I'm coaching called back a couple of days later or sent an email, because that's how that company does it, and said, wow, I got a different response. The employer sent me a note back and said, you really care? And I do care, but I hadn't connected with them. So Tim, I know you love practical, concrete ideas that are not just the theory. I care about you. You have great potential and you made a mistake. Let's learn so that you can reach your potential. Anyway, that's the anchor of that simple idea.
Well, it resonates a lot with me. I've coached a few people and throughout my career and building teams. And, one of my true passions in life is to create and build high-performing teams. I mean, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one thing I've noticed throughout my career, and for me personally, is when we don't hear words, we fill in the void in the absence of that. So if I know I made a mistake, but I'm not hearing any feedback about it, where does your mind go? My mind goes, I made a mistake. I'm going to get in big trouble. I'm fired. I should go to LinkedIn and find another job. Versus, I care about you. You've got great potential. We made a mistake. Let's figure out how to move past that mistake.
I love it. And learn from it. Not move past it, but learn from it, if I could tweak. I love what you just said. I remember talking to a parent. My wife's a psychologist. I have her picture there somewhere. There she is. She's a psychologist on the wall. And I don't want to get the sun in the way of our conversation. And we were talking to a couple that we know, and they said, oh, our kids are teenagers. You have this to look forward to, Tim, when your kids are teenagers. They come in late at night and we don't know what's going on. I don't know what to say. So I said nothing. My comment to a parent is, saying nothing is the loudest thing you could ever say, because it says one of two things. 1, I don't care. 2, I don't know how to parent. I think the loudest feedback a leader gives an employee is nothing. Let me say that again. The loudest feedback is nothing, because the employee says, oh, it wasn't a mistake. I may have made it wrong. It may be okay. Or the leader doesn't know how to give me direction. I think sometimes in performance reviews, it's not about the standard, it's not about the consequence, it's not about the behavior, the metric, or even the reward. It's about the ability to have a conversation and to do what I just said. Let's talk. Because if you don't talk, I love what you just said. People hear what you didn't say and they may misinterpret. So what a great comment, Tim. What a great comment.
I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing that. It's, something that I recognize in myself. If I'm not getting the feedback or if I'm hearing mixed feedback, it's that little narrative that we make up. And sometimes it's the narrative of, oh, well, I guess I'm doing great. That's awesome. Or sometimes it's the narrative of, I must not be doing well. And so as leaders, when we want to leave someone feeling better about themselves, we have to take all these little nuances into consideration as well.
I think it's great. I mean, leadership is not about you. It's about what somebody else gets because of who you are. Coaching another leader, one of the most brilliant stories, and Tim, you should have this person on your show if she's able to do it. Born in the Philippines in a hut, very poor, didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. At age 6, went to a school, sat in the back corner because she couldn't read or write. Now I'm going to do it very fast forward. Ended up in the front row, read and write, graduated top of that school, went to a U.S. college, graduated valedictorian, went to Harvard, got a PhD, MIT PhD, speaks 6 languages. I mean, just one of those iconic people that we're intimidated with. I'm coaching her. She's got a brand. And I've said to her, your job is not to share your story. And everybody wants her to share a story. In fact, last week, we're going to videotape her. We're going to show her. We're going to give her an award for rags to riches. Your job is to help those you lead create their story. And if you can't use your strength so that you strengthen others to create their story, then you haven't led. You've shared that you're great. By the way, nobody's going to have her story. I mean, I sit there and I'm in awe and I love her to share it. It inspires me. It's like we've seen those disabled people or keynote speakers and we just, wow, I'm just sitting there in awe. But leadership is, how do I help you create your story, your brand? And then you've led because their story, that's what parenting is. Somebody I know has got a 5-year-old who's just started school. Well, the job of that father is to help that young girl create her story at school. That's not his, it's hers. Now, that may not happen at age 5 or 6, but at age 15, when they hate you, they'll be trying to, that was a joke. They'll be trying to figure out, where do I fit in this family? So I love what you just said again, that leadership is not about who we are. It's not about our strengths. There's a lot of work. Build on your strengths, build on your strengths. I like to change that. Build on your strengths that strengthen others. And if your strengths don't strengthen someone else, then you've probably not done your job as a leader as well as you might have done it, as you could have.
I'm really curious about this next question. And I know I'm a little scripted right here. And even in the pre-show, I said I'm not scripted, but there's, the purpose of our publication, when I came on full time, I was tired of reading all of these doom and gloom stats and went, how can we help build a better world of work? And that became our tagline with our publication. Everything is through that lens. When you hear that phrase, Dave, build a better world of work, what comes to mind?
Let me give you a metaphor that I hope doesn't offend. It comes out of any religion. It could be Hindu, could be Muslim, could be Jewish, could be Christian. Some prophets look at people and say, you're going to go to hell if you don't repent, and try to get people to change. Other prophets say, let me show you where heaven is and help you get there. What you just described to me is the second. I mean, I think in our field, we often say, look back, do after action reviews, have grit, be resilient, learn, look back, overcome all the tragedy, overcome those horrible things. And by the way, there's a place for that. We need to be honest and candid about that heritage. But I love to be the one that says, look forward. Look at that vision. Look at that beautiful mountain with the tree and the lake and the image that has on your wall. Look at that image and what it means to you. How can I then help you create your pathway to discover what matters to you? That's why I love your image of looking forward, not just backward.
I love that. And I think it's such a close tie to even our conversation about what does it mean to be a leader. And I think it's, when we're leaving somebody feeling better about themselves, we have that, I think we just, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know the inner workings of the brain, but when we leave feeling better about ourselves and having that clear image and direction, we have that ability to look forward. We can learn from our past, learn from our mistakes, learn from our journey, but then look forward and go, well, what's possible? And I think that's what it means to build a better world of work, is if we continue to just say, well, this is what's happened in the past, that those are data points. I think we still need to recognize that, but being able to look forward and the possibilities and then start to create.
Boy, you don't need to be a psychologist, Tim. You've nailed it. There's the father of positive psychology is named Marty Seligman. He's a famous professor. He was the head of American Psychology Association. And he studied early in his career what was called learned helplessness. And if you remember studies where the animals wouldn't move because they felt helpless, they didn't have control. His latest work is brilliant. It's called learned hopefulness. Learned hopefulness. And he says there's three things that give people hope. One is efficacy. I can do the work. If I work at it, I can do it. Two is optimism. I have hope that I could make it happen in the future. And three is imagination. I can discover new ways that work for me. I love that concept of hope. As that image I said about a leader who envisions a future and says, let me show you what the future can be and how to get there. With efficacy, I can make it happen. I can do something. Optimism, it's optimistic. I have strengths. I can do it. And then imagination, I can discover what works for me. When I saw that, by the way, I'm committed to learning. I saw that about 3 weeks ago. And I just got captured with his work, Marty Seligman. And I mean, it's not new. I'm embarrassed that I'm slow getting to his great work. But I love that idea, overcome a sense of helplessness with hopefulness. And I think as leaders, when we do that, we do build a better world of work because we see what can be, and then we give people the path to get there.
Well, I think it's a real good segue into kind of the topic I was hoping the conversation was going to go. And no, I didn't steer it this way. It's just, kind of organically has happened. We talk about that hopefulness, but often I have found, even throughout my career and in coaching others, is when we don't take care of ourselves. This concept of self-leadership, taking care of ourselves so we can take care of others. Often when we talk about build a better world of work, it's like, okay, we're going to march forward. When we talk about being a leader, I'm going to help others. How often do we forget to, as we were talking a little bit in the pre-show, is just to put that oxygen mask on first and to own it and say, today I'm going to clear my calendar because I need the oxygen mask right now. What gets in the way of that?
I think we sometimes get so overwhelmed. Looking backward, we get depressed because of our history. Looking forward, we get anxious because we can't control the future. In our present day, we feel lonely. I mean, those are three of the big issues. My wife, the psychologist, says depression looking back, anxiety forward, loneliness today. And we get overwhelmed and we try to catch up. And we do. I love your comment. We got to put our oxygen mask on first and recognize the signals in our own lives, whatever they are. And then do what works for us. I'm going to go back to coaching because building a better world of work is more personalized. It's coaching. Again, I don't coach all the time, but when I coach leaders, I end every session, or I try, with this question: what do you do to take care of yourself? What do you do to take care of yourself? I had a session this morning, doesn't matter when it was. And I said to the person moderating the discussion, what do you do to take care of yourself? And she said, I exercise. And I said, are you doing it enough? And she said, thanks for the reminder. I'm not. Somebody else, it may be sleep. Somebody else, it may be shopping. Somebody else, it may be spend time with family. I hope it's not drugs and alcohol. Those are usually not long-term successes. And sometimes it may be stuff that's just weird, that has almost nothing to do. In the 90s, and I'll embarrass myself, when I get stressed, and we all should get stressed at times, it's good to get stressed to push, I would watch 2 episodes of the US TV show Seinfeld. I don't know why, but it made me laugh and it just calmed me down. Again, my wife is a psychologist. What are you doing? I said, I'm watching Seinfeld. So she watching, she said, oh, I get it. You're George. Now, if have ever seen Seinfeld, you'll laugh at that. I don't know why that works. I mean, and I think we've got to be sensitive to those self-awareness sensors that says, I need to take is it a half hour? Is it an hour? Is it walking my child to school? Is it exercise? Is it reading a book? Yesterday, I was feeling stressed with some work. I went outside, I sat in the sun and I read. I had to confess, I tried to read a book and I fell asleep for 30 minutes. And I came back and I felt good. And Myra said, were you productive? And I said, probably the most productive 30 minutes of my day. Tim, I hope building a better world of work starts with me. It starts with me. And if you can't take care of yourself, you're going to have a really hard time taking care of others because they won't. Yeah, you can't. You have nothing to give. Steve Covey talked about the goose and the golden egg. You don't want to kill the goose to get the golden egg. You want the golden egg to produce an ongoing stream of golden eggs. I just think that's so critical, Tim. And I hope your podcast, in every podcast, Building a Better World of Work, starting with myself. What a critical message.
It's so critical. And yet often, again, I've been asking a lot of people this question, Build a Better World of Work. On our website, there's over 35 interviews right now, and a huge backlog of interviews. And I don't think there's one that's come up that says we need to start with self-leadership.
So I'm going to ask you, let me ask you, what do you do to take care of yourself? I mean, you're busy with your career, you've got kids, you've got relationships, you've got family, you've got faith, whatever those demands are in your life. What do you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah, it started off, I started a new habit when I started working from home a couple of years ago. And that was, I go for a walk every single morning. So no devices. My kids now call it my dad walk. I walk the same loop every single morning and every single afternoon, rain or shine, because I was finding that I was not being able to unplug when I would shut down my laptop and walk up the stairs, and my brain was still going. But just recently, I canceled a week of meetings. I had emailed people and said, I need to put my oxygen mask on this week. And so we'll reschedule everything. We'll push everything out. And I'm originally from northern British Columbia here in Canada. So I went back home, spend a week with my dad on his little farm, help him get ready for winter. And it was amazing. I mean, it was a 14-hour drive, did it straight in a day. And yes, it was exhausting, but since marriage, I've been married 12 years, 2 kids, I haven't had that time to myself. And it felt very selfish. I felt guilty. It was about 3 hours into my drive and I thought I should turn around. But once I hit about that 6-hour mark and was just listening to my own thoughts in my brain as I was driving down the highway, I went, you know what, this is how I can be a better father, a better husband, a better man of faith, a better leader, a better worker, is taking that time to focus on yourself.
And now the danger is if you were to say, so Dave, you should do that. That's dangerous because I think each person finds their path, and your path is going into British Columbia. By the way, for those who don't know, Tim lives on a river in British Columbia that bisects the ocean. Any of us who've been in British Columbia and Vancouver know it. And he probably ends every walk with an Nanaimo bar. So now that's what I've done to take care of myself, is eat Nanaimo bars.
Oh, love it. But I may or may not have had one last week.
Now everybody who's in Canada will say, yes, I'm going to get one of those. I don't know what works for everyone else, but I think most people know enough about themselves. What is it I've got to do? Is it and exercise, sleep, diet, connecting with loved ones, shopping, faith, prayer, meditation, whatever it is. And I really encourage leaders to find the energy so that their strengths will strengthen others. That's by taking care of yourself, you can then care for others. And it has a lot of elements. I mean, physical, emotional, social, spiritual. And I get in trouble when I don't. I mean, then the next thing I'd say on that is recognize the triggers. I got snarky with a client last week. I never do that because I want to make them feel better, but I got snarky. And as soon as we hung up the interaction, I thought, something's going on here. Dave, you're overstretched. You're overdrawn the emotional bank account, Steve Covey's line. Go find Seinfeld, watch 2 episodes. It took 3. And I had to send an apology, run into the mistake. We've all made them. Run into it, face it, acknowledge it. And then with that client today, we had a great interaction. Because I took care of myself. I think the client took care of the client, and we both went, wow, that was a healthy experience because we got better. I love what you're doing. Make the world a better place by starting with your place. And
yeah. And I would love to spend a couple minutes here just on recognizing the triggers. So I've recognized my triggers. One of my triggers is when I sit down on my computer and I stare at the screen for 3 minutes without moving my fingers and going, okay, something's a little off here. Maybe you got to get up and stretch or call one of my best friends and have a quick 10-minute conversation so you can, give me a virtual kick in the pants to get going. But how do we recognize triggers?
I don't know for sure because I think everybody's going to have their own triggers. I like 5 things I pay attention to a lot. One is physical. Am I gaining weight? Am I not sleeping? Something about my body is not responding the way it could or should. Emotional. I laid out 3, depressed about my past. I'm obsessing about what's happened. I'm anxious about my future. I'm lonely today. Am I feeling some of the emotional angst that I sense in myself? Intellectual. You're sitting at the computer, but there's no ideas. Oh, I'm ready to write, but my idea friends went away. I don't have it. Social. Am I finding myself short with those I love and care about? Am I just not feeling about the relationship I should? And spiritual. Am I finding, this is not about a religion as much as am I finding a sense of the divine, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose? Am I feeling the calling or the manifestation of a spirit? Emotional, physical, social, intellectual, and physical. I just shared some of those triggers. I encourage people to be aware of their own. And if you're not, it's really easy to figure out. Go to the people who know you. You've got 12 years. I bet if you said to your wife, whatever you call your wife, your nickname, do you ever notice me just before I get off a little bit? Could you tell me what you see me doing? Is it physical, social, emotional? I'm almost willing to bet the entire fee for this interview, which is $0, that she'll know what to say, that she knows that. And my wife knows it. In fact, my wife came in on Saturday. She knew I was stretched and she said, Dave, go outside, open a book and fall asleep. And I can do the same. I mean, this is what relationships are about, to help people recognize those triggers.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary sometimes to be vulnerable. Ask the people that are around us, whether it's, in my case, in your case, our partners. Again, I had a similar conversation with my wife even before I went on my trip, but also afterwards, and I could feel myself, lashing out. I get very critical. And she said, Tim, she put her foot down, and I appreciate that. I think after I hang up here, I'm going to have to go tell her that, but in the moment I didn't. But it's, the people around us, whether even if it's our teammates, if you're a leader, it's okay to go to your team and say, hey, I've been feeling a little off. I know I've been coming across a little off. How have I been showing up lately?
Oh, that's such a great question. Now, vulnerability all the time is a sign of weakness. I mean, I want to acknowledge my weaknesses so that I can improve on them and so that I can help you improve on your strengths as well. But I hope those relationships that we have outside of work become iconic for Insight. I think another source is our kids. I remember when our youngest daughter, who's incredibly creative, was about 15 or 16. I was at the computer doing something. She said, Dad, what are you doing? And I said, I'm making a list of things I do wrong. And Tim, you can look forward to this. And she looked at me really quick and she said, I can add 10. and I said, you haven't even seen it. She said, I can add 10. And I go, oh, that's sweet. Let me know. And she told me, and thank you. That's great. I mean, and I think when we become open to feed forward, Marshall Goldsmith's line, we learn. And there's a great line, I'm not failing, I'm learning, is how do I continue to learn so that I get better? And I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but we're improving as we go.
Yeah, I like that. Not failing, I'm learning. And a good friend of mine, his name's Matthew Gould, and he's been on the podcast a few times. And his thing is about, feedback is a gift. So you're saying, like your daughter comes in and says, oh, I've got 10. It's like, oh, okay, tell me more.
Well, don't tell me more. 10 is enough for me. But no,
10's enough. Yeah.
But let's talk. I mean, and one of the great lines, it's not mine. A lot of people are taking credit. We judge ourselves by our intent and others judge us by our behavior. So back to the coaching one-on-one. I intended that example I started with, I intended to help you be better. But the way you said it, you failed, you cost us money, you're going to get fired. That's not going to accomplish your goal at all. And others judge you. And so when we think about how what we do is impacting others, and our job as leaders is to help others do what they do better. Build on your strengths to strengthen others, or use your power to empower others. And when we have that headset, that's not always easy to get. But I think when we have that, then we build a better world through the leadership that we offer.
You said something a couple of minutes ago that has really piqued my interest, and it was around vulnerability and weakness. And so walk me through that a little bit. Yeah, I think you said something along the lines of if we're too vulnerable or always vulnerable, it could be a sign of weakness. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit.
Well, I love the concept. I think we have weak things that allow us to get stronger. They're not sins. They're not mortal failures. I'm not always very good at listening to people. I actually cut you off if you listen twice. And I cut Tim off twice a little bit before he was done. I apologize for that. That's a weakness. A weakness is something we recognize that gets in our way of accomplishing what we want to do. And I think that's something we should be aware of. Now, if all we do is go around and say, oh, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, people will go, okay, I'm starting to believe you. But we recognize our weakness so that we can take care of ourselves and then care for others. So let me apologize again. Twice I cut you off in the early part of even this interview. And I know that's a weakness. I'm prone to that. And I'm trying to be aware of when I do it.
Thank you for apologizing. I did not notice, but I appreciate your recognition in that and apologizing. And I love that, just that clarity that you provided around vulnerability and weakness, right? If we're always being vulnerable about like, I'm terrible at this. Oh, I wish I could be better. Oh, I wish I could be better. And that goes on for days, weeks, months. People are going to start going, okay, well, you're vulnerable at sharing how terrible you are, but what are you going to do about it? Versus, hey, I'm terrible at this, or I'm really struggling with this, and here's how I'm working towards it. It's that second piece of that sentence.
If people want to look at that, my wife did a phenomenal book. She's a PhD psychologist, called Weakness is Not Sin. That sometimes we sin and we make egregious errors when we don't live our values. You've done something against the values. That's a mistake. We've got to repent. We've got to change. We've got to fundamentally change. Whereas weakness is just mortal reality. I didn't listen as well. I was sharp with my partner whom I love when I didn't intend it. Those are just things we can learn from. And again, I'm going to share this. I don't usually share this. There's a great line, and I put it on a pillow for my wife. I'm not failing, I'm learning. I think that's a great embroidered pillow. I brought that into my office for an earlier call this morning with someone. I'll show it to your group as well. I think that's weakness. I'm not failing, I'm learning. Well, sometimes again, the metaphor comes out of a religious heritage, but sin is when you violate your values. You steal money, you kill someone, you do something that violates a value you have. That takes some really serious change of mind. But weakness is, I'm learning. And I hope we can get that headset. It's a great headset.
Yeah. And I think even on the kind of the topic for our conversation is that self-leadership. I've talked with so many leaders throughout my career as, no, I cannot show that sign of weakness. I need to be that show of authority. If I admit that I'm not doing well, then it's a sign of weakness. But it's not. You're not failing, you're learning. And it's that self-learning, that self-leadership, which then can plant your feet solid on the ground again to go and lead your team and guide your team or guide your organization.
Or work with them that they help guide you. Now I've cut you off again, I'm sorry. But if I engage them, they help guide me as much as I guide them. And together we move forward, which is what leadership is ultimately trying to do.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, for somebody who's listening who knows that they need to put that oxygen mask on first, they know that they've heard self-leadership, they've read about it 100 times, they keep hearing it and reading it all throughout LinkedIn. Friends keep telling them, it's like, oh, you need to take care of yourself, exercise more, eat better, sleep better. It's all easy to hear and to read. What is a practical way to start? Like, how do we actually start on this journey?
My first line is I wouldn't listen to any of my friends. I mean, by the way, I'm trying to be counterintuitive. I've gained weight and I've lost weight. And if you look at pictures, you can see both. When I was heavy, everybody would come to me and say, here's the secret to losing weight. And finally, I'd look at people and say, I am so glad you know what works for you. I am so glad you know what works for you. It's a walk every day by the river. That may work for you. It's whatever diet, whatever nutrition. I'm so glad it works for you. And so I would say, listen to the voice in your own head. I think most people have whatever you want to call that, self-image, self-voice, spirit, whatever it is. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And you know what? It may not be what everybody else suggests to you. Now, your close partners may give you insights that they are wise, but what's going to work for me? And I encourage people to be really thoughtful. What am I doing I'll get more personal here. I don't do this very often. Every morning, that's not true. Most mornings I try, if I'm being rigorous. You're very disciplined, obviously, on your walks. My discipline is in my morning meditations, whatever you want to call them, the musings of prayer, it's who can I serve today? Who can I serve today? Go through my checklist of my close friends, family, loved ones, my near friends, and listen, does a name come to mind? Probably 5 days out of 10, some name comes to mind. Go serve. Send them a note, send them a box of chocolate, whatever, And by the way, I'm now going to have people saying, my name came to your mind. But, and probably 80% of the time, not 100 people say, I really needed that today. I don't know where that comes from, but I know that when I'm in that reflective mood, that there is a sense that if I look for opportunities to give back, they will present themselves. And not every time, but most of the times that will be a rewarding experience. Sometimes very rewarding, sometimes very rewarding. That's a personal pattern that I've tried to do.
I love that. I love that servant leadership, that, who can I serve? And it's something that I know I aspire for, and I aspire to be and to do. And often, my to-do list gets in the way, and that's just an excuse. But I love that you also said, don't listen to your friends.
I mean, that's counterintuitive.
It's super counterintuitive. It's often, even my friends, and I'm really guilty of this, is I've got an opinion and I've got advice to solve everything. And yet we don't necessarily take the time to really understand people's situation, understand what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe it's health related or family or something personal. It's like, oh, you look tired today, Tim, you should probably go to bed earlier. It's like, well, actually, I've got health related problems that are causing this. So I could go to bed right now and sleep for 16 hours and I still wake up tired. So, we all have that advice.
I love that. I think we all fall prey to that. One of the things, again, I'm going back to coaching because a lot of our conversation is around personal relationships. When somebody comes to a leader with a problem, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. Let's go to the emotion, depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Many leaders want to jump in, get more sleep, get more exercise. The best question is 4 words. What do you think? What do you think? Because most people who come to a leader with something they're working on have thought about it a lot more than I have. So what do you think? What would work for you? How would you solve that? And sometimes all they need is for someone to say, you know what? That's a pretty good idea. Tim, you may need to go to the doctor. Tim, you may need to go take a 14-hour drive by yourself. Go into outer boondocks in northern British Columbia and go back to the roots and just spend a day with your fingers in the dirt. And Tim says, I think I should do that. And I say, Tim, what a great idea. Bring me back a vegetable. I mean, what do you think? And I love that because most people may know if they're free to take care of themselves. Anyway, I find that question actually quite helpful. What do you think? What do you think would help?
Yeah, I love that. What would work for you versus, hey, let me tell you what has worked for me and maybe you should try this.
Well, my line now, I'm cynical when people say that. I love to say, I am so glad that worked for you. I have a really close friend when I was heavy. Dave, you need to exercise. How much are you exercising? Well, I do an hour a day. I am so proud of you. That's really good. And implicitly, I'm saying in my head is, that's not working for me. That doesn't work for me. There's something else that I need to discover.
Yeah. Yeah. When we're in those coaching conversations, whether it's in personal life or in work, in our leadership lives, let's take ourselves out of the center of that story. And it's not about me as a leader and say, look at me, I'm higher than you. So I'm going to tell you what's worked for me. And now you should go try this. It's tell me more.
So I know our time's running down. I've got to ask him, you've done 30 to 40 interviews. You've done magazines. You publish in great people managing people. What's one of the lessons you've heard lately that just not in our call? So take mine out of it, but what's one of the lessons you've heard that you're just saying, you know what? I got to think about that a little bit. What's something you've heard? And that's not scripted for me or for you. Just tell me something you've learned that's been kind of on your mind lately that you grabbed.
Yeah, what's really been on my mind, or a theme that I have noticed throughout the publication and the interviews, whether it's podcast or written, it's the human side of leadership. It's less about we just need to implement a great strategy to get things done. It's like, well, for me, it's who's going to implement that strategy? a bunch of humans. And guess what? We're all uniquely different. I have beliefs and values that guide me. You have different beliefs and values that guide you. Everyone on my team is uniquely different. So how do we as leaders or organizations bring the human side back into that organization? We definitely need to be paying our people. We need to provide safe places to work. We need to take care of that. There's a great book on my shelf, and I love this book. It's called Primed to Perform, and we need to be offering people play, purpose, and potential. And so as a leader, we have, again, unique individuals. And so that's what I'm hearing as a theme throughout the interviews. And I've been talking to best-selling authors and CEOs of companies and founders. I've also been talking to people at various levels of organizations. And people are craving that human element of leadership. People are craving, like, get to know me. Ask me questions. Like, even before we hit play, you were asking about my kids and where I live, and about my background, and about the painting on my wall. And within 5 minutes, I felt like, oh, Dave, we've known each other for years. And it doesn't take long. And I think that is the big theme that I am hearing, and that I'd love to continue that conversation. I'd love to see more and more leaders going, okay, we've got a great product. We're generating sales. How do we just take care of our teams? How do we create these happy, healthy, and productive workplaces?
I love play, purpose, and potential. I wrote it down because we've done a lot of work on what engages people. What's the new term? Quiet, or whatever it is, quiet quitting, which is kind of an old term. And anyway, experience, whatever you call it. We talk about believe, become, and belong. Believe, that's purpose. Become, that's potential. And belong, that's play together. So I really love the three that you came up with: play, purpose, and potential. For us, believe, become, and belong. And when a leader creates that, purpose, potential, and play, the same metaphors, you create something magical. Work is not a 4-letter word. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. I wish I could take credit for that. It's a book by Neil Doshi and his partner, Lindsay, and her last name escapes me. And the book is called Primed to Perform. So for anybody who's listening, I'll put a link in the show notes. It's a phenomenal read, and it's a great study that talks about, well, believe, become, and belong. It's a maybe a different metaphor, but that's where I continue to see, we continue to see stats of disengagement, quiet quitting, which again isn't new. I quietly quit a job in my late teens, in my early 20s. It's been around for 20 to 50, I don't know how long, but people have been doing it for generations. But if we want to continue, if we want to help people build and have amazing lives, us as organizations have a stake in that. And if we own that and say, you know what, Dave, if you were on my team, how can I pull out the potential in you to accelerate your career? Maybe it'll only be for a year or two in my organization, but man, I'm going to set you up for, my goal as a leader, as an organization, is to help you succeed.
Totally. Again, we may end where we started. A leader's job is to help other people feel better about themselves. And when you get that headset, value is what you get from my interaction. Use your power to empower others, your strengths to strengthen others, whatever metaphor you want. That's leadership. And I wish more did it. I mean, I hope we see it with parents, with children. I hope we see it in government, with political leaders. We've all been around political leaders, whatever country we're in, of those who don't do that. I hope we see it in organizations. I hope we see it in church settings, religious settings, where the purpose of that leadership is to help others create their value, not just to distribute your value. Great comment. Thank you.
I love that. And I think it's a great place to end. And I know, Dave, I think, if I had 6 hours of your time, we could just continue on the conversation and let it flow. And thanks so much for coming on and having just a great conversation with me about, we talked about build a better world of work, self-leadership. We've talked about how to become a leader.
Tim, thank you. I feel better about myself. I don't need to watch Seinfeld today. I'm doing fine. So
Well, thank you. I don't know if I could replace Seinfeld. My wife is an avid Seinfeld fan, and so she often turns to Seinfeld versus me. So, I appreciate hearing that. And for those who are listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Please feel free to drop me an email, send me an email to tim@peoplemanagingpeople.com. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And Dave, again, thanks for coming on. And for those who are interested to hear more, to follow you, where's the best place people can reach you at or to connect with you?
I decided during COVID, go to LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn because it's a global platform. It doesn't matter who's communicating. I don't look up where they're from. You could be from Sri Lanka, you could be from New York City, you could be from Calgary, but engage. And I try to respond. Somebody said, do you do all those responses or do you have a team? It's me, all me. And I enjoy those.
Well, we appreciate that. I appreciate you, Dave. And thanks again for coming on. And for those who are listening as well as yourself, Dave, have a good day.